These are the readings for the senior final exam. The first is an excerpt from an article called The New Survivors by Pamela Weintraub, 2009. In her article, The New Survivors, Pamela Weintraub examines the attitudes and mindsets of cancer survivors. As you read, take note of the author's central ideas and how cancer patients have been impacted by their experiences. Carol Ferran, an elder care expert from Rush University Medical Center in Chicago, sought to understand why some nursing home residents thrived despite adversity and isolation, while others just withered away. The difference between the two groups, she found, was hope. Not the blind or rigid optimism that usually passes for hope, but an open sense of possibility, acceptance of risk, and a willingness to work things out. Hopefully, people face reality with a clear-eyed fashion, doing the best they can. One woman, too sick to go outdoors, for instance, maintained an upbeat attitude by remembering the emotional riches of her past. The hopeful person looked at reality and then arrived at solutions. If a hoped-for outcome became impossible, the hopeful person would find something else to hope for, Ferran found. The role of hope in cancer has also come under scrutiny. Psychologists at the Royal Marsden Hospital in London and Sutton studied women with early-stage breast cancer and found that risk of reoccurrence or death increased significantly among those who lacked hope. There was nothing mysterious or mystical about it. Hopeful patients managed their illnesses themselves, instead of letting outsiders pull the strings. They often chose the most aggressive treatments, and, envisioning the light at the end of the tunnel, helped provide the strength they needed to get through each difficult day. Yet hope was not a given for them. It was an attitude they wrested from despair. Despite being an expert on hope, Ferran could not muster any when she herself was diagnosed with breast cancer. She met the news with anger, grief, and fear of death. Panic propelled her through her treatment in a total daze. Only when she went in for breast reconstruction was a wise old nurse able to penetrate her panic. A year from now, you'll be where you want to be, but there's no way to get there except by going through this experience now. As despair loosened its hold on Ferran, she tried to embrace the flexibility she had studied in others. I told myself to get a grip, she says. Finally, she thought of her love of playing piano and decided to buy a metronome, a symbol of what she called slow time. It was a palpable reminder to calm down, confront her fear of death, and think things through. You can start in despair, but arrive in hope, says Ferran, 18 years later. Hope can be learned. Passage 2 from the nonfiction is an excerpt from a passage called Can a Devastating Shark Attack Really Lead to a Better Life? By Melanie Greenberg in 2011. This 2011 article, psychologist Melanie Greenberg, PhD, discusses Bethany Hamilton's experience of losing her arm while surfing. According to Dr. Greenberg, the way Bethany dealt with this traumatic event is an example of what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. As you read, make notes about the way Bethany grew as a person and the psychology behind it. A new appreciation of life. People also report a greater appreciation of the life they have following trauma. Bethany lost a huge amount of blood and came very close to dying. When people look death in the eye, they may realize how good it is just to be alive. Bethany's trip to Thailand was a turning point because she met people in situations worse off than hers. She felt tremendous compassion for a woman who had lost her family, leading Bethany to appreciate the close bond she had with her own family. When she learned to surf again with one arm, she experienced the joy of being able to do this. This part of the movie brought to mind psychologist Shelley Taylor's concept of downward comparison. We can restore our self-esteem by comparing ourselves to people who are even worse off, or to hypothetical worse outcomes, such as dying or being unable to surf again. Relative to these imagined fates, our current situation seems fortunate. In addition to the post-traumatic growth aspects, Soul Surfer also sent a powerful message that being beautiful and strong on the inside was far more important than what you looked on the outside. Bethany expressed her concern that boys would not be attracted to her with one arm, yet at the end she seems to come to terms with the loss. She even rejected the idea of wearing a non-functional prosthetic arm just for appearances. While nobody who experiences trauma has the resources, ability, and family support that Bethany had, this movie is a beautiful illustration of the human capacity to thrive, even in the face of devastating events. If you have experienced a traumatic event or a difficult childhood, it may help to think about personal strength that you showed to survive these events. Even if you made some mistakes or did some things you regret, you did what you had to do to survive, and that is something to be proud of. Think about the things you have in your life currently that make it meaningful, be it relationships, your work, your faith, or taking care of your family. Try to find everyday happiness in the life that you have now. Think about what you have learned from going through difficulties and how you might use this knowledge to help yourself and other people create something of value for the world. Know that your growth and hope can coexist with grief and that there will be ups and downs when one or other emotion dominates. The next reading is a fiction piece, and it is called A Yankee Copeda by Khalid Khashoggi. Marcus stood by the window, watching the dust descend. He switched on the desk lamp. Turning back to draw the curtains, his hand caught the photo frame, which fell to the floor. He picked it up and ran his finger slowly and lovingly across the picture of a woman smiling. Sorry, my dear, 20 years later, and I still managed to knock you down. The door opened. Is that you, Jolene? He called. Nope. Wrong age, wrong gender, wrong profession. It's your aging money minder, not your beautiful, youthful girlfriend. Marcus grinned. Never mind. Come in, Albert. What brings you here? Don't tell me that I'm finally bankrupt. Help yourself to a drink. Not quite. Not yet. Please. Yes. Shall I pour you one too? Marcus shook his head. My goodness, Marcus, are you sick? We've been drinking together since our teens. This is no time to stop. Albert glanced at the photo that Marcus was holding. I see. Old memories of a very rich widower. Marcus crossed the room to the fireplace. The nights are drawing in. I will need to light the fire later. He placed the photo on the shelf above the hearth, then turned back to Albert. I was never worthy of her. The other laughed. What sentimental nonsense. You gave her everything. The trips around the world, the private jet, the villa in the south of France, this mansion. I was never there for her. You were creating and building the business to what it is now. Money doesn't grow on trees. No. And it doesn't build a relationship. No, but it certainly helps. I'm sure Jolene would agree with that. Marcus looked up sharply. What do you mean by that? Albert took a deep breath. Look, Marcus, the truth is that I didn't pass by here just to have a drink with my oldest friend. It's a more serious matter that brings me. I'm not sure how to tell you this. Go on, instructed Marcus. I don't mean to be a sneak, but, well, we both know what the real world is like. Albert paused long enough to finish his drink. It's about Jolene. I saw her today on Madison Avenue. Of course she did. She went shopping, Marcus smiled. She loves shopping on Madison Avenue. Albert, feeling his courage stirred by the alcohol, said defiantly, she wasn't in the shop, Marcus. She was having lunch. She was with a young man. They were very lively together, very familiar. Well, overly familiar, maybe intimate. Marcus, seemingly unperturbed, said nothing. You know, I know her background. She's always worried me. It's always worried me that you picked her up from nowhere. All those years after your wife's death, you never looked at another woman. Then a year ago, you meet this girl from the Bronx who sells flowers at a corner store, and suddenly all has changed for you and for her. Maybe having reached this dizzying height, she wants to prepare for a future with somebody younger? Marcus regarded his solemnly. Then he looked askance. You know nothing about this guy she was with? Oh, but I do. Albert seemed embarrassed. When he left her, I followed him to his office. His name is Peter Nisuno. He's a high-level executive at McKinsey Bank. That's all I found out. There was a silence. I'm sorry. I thought you should know. We've been best friends since we were kids. Marcus nodded. Yes, I see. It's good to know you're still looking out for me. He paused. I will deal with it from here. I think I will have that drink now. After Albert left, Marcus lit the fire. Sorry. Sorry. I bounced down all the way here. All right. After Albert had left, Marcus lit the fire in the hearth and sat down in his armchair, regarding the flames. He heard the car crunch on the gravel outside, followed by the slamming of car doors and then the front door. A cheerful voice rang out. Marcus, darling, I'm home. In the library. Jolene brought energy and several carrier bags into the room. Her face was flushed and her smile was broad. Did you miss me? I hope so. What a day. I need a drink. No, don't get up. I'll do it. Do you want another one? He shook his head. Come and show me what you bought today. She carried her drink and the day's treasures across the room and sat herself down on the rug in front of him. Ooh, a lovely warm fire. My fingers are frozen. She stretched her hands out and watched the jewels on her fingers flicker in the firelight. Marcus leaned forward and, taking her hand, gently guided her onto his lap. With a soft voice, he says, "They are beautiful indeed. Now, Jolene, tell me about Peter." She lowered her eyes. Her smile vanished. She contemplated her rings quietly for a minute and then, in a low, stern voice, "Peter's fine. He sends his love, and as always, he thanks you for all the support you've given him over the years." Then, turning her head to face Marcus, she lifted her pitch and said, "But darling, you have to understand, he is not complete. He so much wants to meet you. After all these years of waiting patiently, he feels the time has come. He needs to know his father. It is so important for him, as it is for you. Isn't it time you acknowledged him as your son? You can't keep him a secret forever, you know." She looked up at the photo on the shelf. "Surely by now she could forgive you?" He nodded and squeezed her hand gently. "Yes, you are right. The relationship is all that matters."